sewing the hopscotch quilt. It's such a fun one for playing with colors and fabrics and prints and things, but it does have a lot of half square triangles. So this is a great one for using some shortcuts with piecing and squaring up half square triangles. I'm gonna demo a quick way to make 16 of the half square triangle blocks at a time, and we'll show how to sew them really quick, cut them all at once, and then square them up really quickly. So you'll get through that stack of half square triangles in no time. So the first thing we're gonna do is make 16 half square triangle blocks at once. And the way we need to do that is cut a 10-inch by 20-inch piece of our white background fabric and whatever contrasting background fabric you're gonna use. Pin those together and then draw a grid of 4 5-inch squares across by 2 down. Then we'll use the ruler to draw the diagonal lines. Each square is going to have one diagonal line, and so this 2 diamond variation works the best. We're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides of this drawn diagonal line. So I'll take it over to the machine and show you how that works. So now we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam on both sides of these drawn lines. So I'm using my seam guide, just lining it right up on the line, or the edge of your presser foot, whichever you use to get that your 1/4 inch. So on the inside pivot, we'll hit the grid and drop the needle and pivot there. When it's an outside pivot, we'll sew past the line, drop the needle, pull the fabric piece around and maneuver it and start again. All right, so from here we're gonna cut all these half square triangle blocks really quickly. First we'll cut right on the grid. And it doesn't really matter too much what kind of pen you use because you're cutting on that line. You can use a pencil or a really fine micro tip. I used a fatter one just so you could see the lines. But in reality, they're not gonna show because we're cutting them off. And now we'll go through and cut on the diagonal lines. So for each square, we get 2 identical half square triangle blocks. Now we're going to talk about squaring up those half square triangle blocks. And I know that's everyone's least favorite part of the quilting process, but it's so important to have a really accurately pieced quilt that looks really clean and sharp. So we're squaring up our blocks to 4.5 inch squares, and we want to definitely make sure that that center seam goes from point to point. So here is my favorite tip. I love this Quilt in a Day ruler by Eleanor Burns. So the way this ruler works is we're going to find the 4.5 inch line, because that's the size squares we're using, and we put that mark right on the seam. So it's going to line up right on the seam. Then instead of having to square all 4 sides, we square 2 at a time. It doesn't matter if it's perfectly centered as long as that 4.5 inch line is on the seam. I just trim the little dog ears really quick, and I have a perfect 4.5 inch square.